Canada is in crisis. Housing's unaffordable, emergency rooms are overwhelmed, families are struggling to make ends meet, and there's still no budget. So what do our politicians?
The housing market is so fucked, and I honestly don't even know what to do anymore.
But the housing crisis in Canada is disgusting, especially in Toronto.
Most households are predicted to no longer be able to afford a house, which has been one of the defining characteristics of what middle class means in Canada.
Still talking about the living cost in Canada, I think number one thing that is sucking a lot of money is mortgage.
One of the dumbest financial decisions you can make is buy a house.
So when exactly did Canada's housing problem become so unaffordable?
Canada is facing a housing crisis. Homes are expensive. Rent is insane. Wages didn't grow, but prices did. People aren't living anymore. They're just surviving.
The housing market is so fucked, and I honestly don't even know what to do anymore. I don't even know what to say. No one gives a shit about comparable sales. No one gives a shit what the exact unit sold for 3 days ago. People are just putting the most ridiculous amount of money on paper as an offer, giving it to the listing agent and saying, take all my money and my kidney. And what seller wouldn't accept more money? Really? So then they take it. But as soon as that offer is accepted, what they don't realize is they're contributing to the market appreciating at an unprecedented and completely unsustainable rate. I'm not kidding. My client and I just offered on a condo. Identical condo, actually was much nicer. Sold, 2 weeks ago for $645. We offered $645 on this condo. We're in third place out of 10 offers. And we're quite far from the top offer, she told me. In what world is this okay? More and more agents are telling me that it's foreign investors that are winning all of these units. All these foreign investors are coming with their money bags that they want to park in Canada. They have deep pockets and they don't care. They don't care what they're doing to the housing market and what they're doing to locals who actually want to buy here. And why would they care? They're benefiting from foreign investors buying here because every single purchase, they get a 15% foreign buyer's tax on. So as these foreign investors are driving up our housing market, the government is making 15% commission on every single purchase. You say realtors make too much money? The government is making all of that money, not us. I have to call these poor people who spend their entire lives saving up $100,000 to buy a fucking condo and say, I'm so sorry, but actually you don't have enough money. You either give them more money or you lose. Too bad, so sad. When is this gonna end and how is this gonna end? I don't even know, honestly, people ask me, when do you think it's gonna get better? I don't know anymore. I really don't know. I don't know how this is gonna get fixed. I don't know when it's gonna get fixed, and I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. What I can say is that something needs to be done, and something needs to be done quickly, because very soon Canadians won't be able to afford to buy properties in their hometowns. And that concept is absolutely heartbreaking to me. Anyways, I'm gonna go cry in my bathroom because this is depressing.
The middle class is officially dying in Canada. Check this out. Most households are predicted to no longer be able to afford a house, which has been one of the defining characteristics of what middle class means in Canada. This is the average middle class income in Canada, depending on your province. So let's take a look at Ontario, for example, at about 70,000. This is in a province where the average home sells for over 800 grand. This means your average job, like an accountant, a school teacher, or a nurse, can no longer be middle class in Ontario. And we haven't even talked about having a car or saving for retirement. So what's going to happen here, in my theory, is we're in the middle of a paradigm shift in which the majority of households are no longer able to afford a home. We're going to have two major classes, not unlike today, with renters forming the majority and homeowners forming the smaller minority. And this trend will actually be more prominent as we head into major city centers like Toronto, which is now apparently less affordable than both New York and Miami. So who actually has the income to afford one of these average middle class homes in Ontario? Well, it's just your top few percent of households. Is this the end of Canada's middle class, and is it time to leave? Let me know.
I'm gonna be the one to say it because I don't care, but the housing crisis in Canada is disgusting, especially in Toronto. I can't believe that we live in a first world country and there's people here waiting to get access to a shelter. not housing. When I say shelter, I'm not talking about housing or housing units. I'm talking about a shelter, like a homeless shelter. Okay? If you go on Google right now and you type in free things to do in Toronto, they're going to say, oh, why don't you walk Allen Gardens? If you walk Allen Gardens, there are communities there of people who are homeless living in tents. I'm not blaming the homeless community. I actually admire them for their resilience and for the fact that they built community. I see them cooking food like on fire. They have their flags represented outside their tents. They're listening to music. They have their dogs, all of that. But how do you have a country like Canada, is so lacking so much resources, where people are building communities in parks? Every park you go to this summer, chances are on those benches, you're going to see someone who's not housed sleeping there. And I'm not blaming the homeless community. A lot of the contributing factors to homelessness is many things. People lose their jobs, they lose their families, they're coming in here as immigrants, whatever the case may be. That's not really their fault. It's a systemic issue, but it needs to be addressed. So I don't know. I think the onus now is kind of on us to advocate. We need to maybe write to our local MPs. If everyone does that, take 10 minutes of your time, write and tell the government and whoever, political leaders, they need to address this housing crisis. You have people, it's sad to see a mother with 2-3 kids and she cannot get a shelter space. Where do you want them to go? Where do you want them to live? Outside? As a country, I'm not saying the government needs to house everyone. I'm not saying pay for everyone to afford a condo. But I'm saying there needs to at least be shelter space so people are safe. The basic needs, food and shelter, at least need to be met. How can we sit here and make fun of, and a lot of people in Canada, I'm sorry, but y'all are ignorant. Y'all want to talk about people in Africa suffering, they don't have food, There's people in Canada suffering, Canadians, people who are not Canadians, it doesn't matter, who don't have access to even water. At least in Africa, if you're going to look at these poor villages, they have community, they have access to water, they can make it work with food. We have Canadians who are struggling with addictions issues, mental health, that's on the rise, and there's no support or no resources. I don't know what the answer is, but as a social worker, it's sad to see, and it is definitely challenging to work with, but it's like, what's being done about it? I don't see it. Yes, there's ample resources, but they're oversaturated. Everything has a wait list, and a lot of the things are systemic issues. And here's the irony, okay? Because I know this video is going to be very long, and people don't have the attention span to watch long videos, but the irony is that you have someone who is like neurotypical, who becomes homeless for whatever reason, and they end up developing addictions and mental health issues, and even that can get addressed. You have people who don't have access to a washroom to take a nice proper shit with dignity. You get to go home. If you're watching this video, you're probably someone who gets to go home. You get to shit, scroll on social media, wipe your butt when you're done, wash your hands. There's people that they're hiding, they're pooing in corners because they don't have nowhere to go. They can't be squatters or loiterers going into Tim Hortons to use the bathroom or McDonald's or whatever company. They can't be, lingering there. What do you want people to do? So, like I said, it's becoming, and last point, it's going to result in more crime. If people do not have access to food, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to steal it. If people need money and they can't work because an employer is not going to hire them. Why? Because if you're homeless, you probably don't have, the clothing to be professional, to be, considered for the job. They're going to go steal your car and sell it to someone who's going to go ship it off to a different country. Why do you guys think crime is increasing? Why do you think car theft is increasing? Because people are suffering. It's not because people are just making bad choices. People are out here trying to survive. I'm not justifying it. I'm not sitting here saying that if someone stole my stuff, oh, it's okay because they're suffering. But what I'm saying is, we know if you look at sociology, if you look at understanding crime in society, that's what happens. So I don't know, but y'all need to put some pep in your step to really rectify the housing issue. People need to at least be housed and at least have meals. That's all I'm saying. And my last point, sorry. Apparently, we're not supposed to say people who are homeless anymore. It's derogatory. We're saying people with lived experience. No, it's people who are homeless. Stop masking what it is. That's so irritating with being, I don't even want to get too political, but I'm not gonna speak on like political views, but I think we're trying so hard to be anti-oppressive that we're watering down what the issue is. When you say to people and you're trying to advocate, oh yeah, there's people with lived experience of being homeless, that doesn't mean that they're currently homeless. It means that they've experienced at one point being homeless. Let's be real and say there's a housing crisis and many people are homeless. Homeless people say they're homeless. So why are we now, as the workers and as the professionals and as the political leaders, saying people with lived experience? No, that's masking it. That's watering down how raw and unfair it really is. Homeless persons, that's what it is. Let's just call it what it is. Let's be real. So when people hear it, they know what the issue is. It's not just with lived experience.
What is going on in Canada that this house costs? Let's play a game. Get a number in your head, okay? Think, what do you think this costs? All right, hold on, because you're wrong. $3 million for that? Assault. Okay, this is in Vancouver. And people say Vancouver's the LA of Canada when it comes to real estate. No. In LA, that would cost what? Like 900 grand? Maybe 1.5 on a really bad day? In no world is that $3 million. So I'm from Oklahoma. In Oklahoma, that is 75 grand. And what miffs me is like, if that's 3 million, okay, well, I'd hate to see 5 million. Like the one next door, what's that? 4.5 million, it's 2 stories. So is all of your money just completely wrapped up? In your house, can you even afford to buy? Why would you live in Vancouver? Just went there, loved it. I get why you'd live there. Not for $3 million in that bad boy. I bet that is one. Well, let's look. How many bedrooms? 4 bedrooms and 2 baths.
So when exactly did Canada's housing problem become so unaffordable, and who exactly is to blame for this? So we always hear these usual reasons, stuff like restrictive zoning, population growth, permit delays, high development fees, slow wage growth, and of course, interest rates. But instead of all those reasons, let's just ask, when exactly did this happen? When did we hit this tipping point where housing just became so unattainable for so many people? Now, a great way to measure affordability is to look at the average home price compared to average disposable income, which is basically how many years of income it would take to buy a home. And if you look at that ratio in Canada, in the UK, and the US, something really stands out. In the US, this ratio has been between 6 and 9 times income for decades, even during the bubbles in 1980, 2006, and again in 2022, but it always corrects. In Canada, it was like that too until 2007. From 2001 to 2007, prices started to creep up, but after 2007, 2008, that's when things really went off the rails in Canada. Since that time, we've blown past 9 times income, like 10 times in 2015, 12 times in 2016, and 16 times income by 2022. So what exactly happened in 2007, 2008? Well, the biggest shift was in monetary policy. After the global financial crisis, the Bank of Canada had slashed interest rates to near zero in 2009 and kept them there for years and years and years. Now, unlike the US, in Canada, we actually did not have a housing crisis. Instead, we actually avoided it, but we created a new one in a way. These extremely low interest rates made borrowing dirt cheap, right? If you can effectively borrow as much money as you want for near 1 or 2%, or let's say even 0% interest rate, of course, people are going to borrow as much money as they possibly can. Investors piled in, used a massive amount of leverage to buy homes. And not only to live in, but to make money, to invest in real estate. So demand really exploded, and not really from families, but for speculators, right? People that just thought prices would go up and up and up and up. These people were truly chasing returns from housing. If you combine all of that with slow housing supply, thanks to all the zoning and red tape that we've had to endure over the last few years, you get this runaway of prices that we've seen in Canada over the last 5 to 8 years. Now, here's something really crazy to know if you don't know this. Canadians now carry the highest personal debt levels among the world's top 10 economies. How crazy is that? So yes, we avoided disaster in 2008 by cutting rates to zero, but we left them there for so long that people just borrowed as much money as possible and flooded it into housing, thus creating the runaway prices that we see here today. So it may be other factors, but the zero interest rate policy that we saw from 2007, 2008 to just a few years ago could be the main reason why we have this crisis on our hands right now. What do you guys think?
Canada, let's admit it, is running a con. Not a little one, not the nickel and dime kind. No. This is the national pastime. The main event. Housing is not a sector of the economy. It is the economy. The racket works like this. Inflate the price of homes to stratospheric levels. Clap politely while developers and speculators roll in it. And then tell the under 40s, like me, they ought to be grateful for their rented broom closets at $3,000 a month. And when the racket shows strain, when the plebs begin to mutter about rents, mortgages, and futures on indefinite hold, the state does what states always do. It reaches for a scapegoat. In this case, Indian students. Trudeau's Liberals, all weary benevolence and technocratic sincerity, fingered the 20-year-old arriving from Punjab with a duffel bag as the prime mover of Canadian misery. Apparently, these kids crammed 6 to a flat in Scarborough are responsible for the speculative bubble that has turned the Greater Toronto Area into a monopoly board. Sheer absurdity has the ring of genius. It's like blaming the match girl for the inferno, or the diner for the obesity epidemic. But scapegoating has its purposes. It distracts. And in the meantime, the government's brilliant wheeze, throttling visas, kneecaps the one sector still staggering along, the universities. Starved of funding, they've been kept alive by foreign tuition fees. Block the students, and you don't fix the housing crisis. You collapse the education system. This is politics as slapstick, pratfalls with consequences. Universities shuffle into bankruptcy hearings. Youth look at Zillow with the same despair they once reserved for oncology reports. And the housing market? Unconcerned. Keeps climbing. Because here's the truth. The students were never the cause. The cause is speculation. A polite word for casino capitalism. Condos sit empty as investment vehicles. Neighborhoods become balance sheets. Tenants are yield. Homes are not homes in Canada. They are poker chips. Interpret this as theater, if you like. The government mouths affordability while dancing in step with its donors. The developers hum along, grinning with their pockets out. Meanwhile, the under 40s like me stand on the pavement, faces pressed to the glass. Told the real problem is that too many foreigners are crowding the buffet. It would be funny if it weren't annihilating. Now, game theory sharpens the joke. 3 players at the table: government, speculators, public. For decades, the equilibrium has been fixed. Government sides with speculators, public swallows the losses. Scapegoats keep the narrative tidy. Now, universities, once aloof citadels, are dragged down into the muck. For the first time, youth and academia share the same fate. Priced out, hollowed out, shut out. 2 futures throttled at once. Here perversely lies the opportunity. A coalition. Students and universities together. They can finally alter the script. Stop begging separately. Start demanding jointly. No more scapegoats. No more asset class housing. No more austerity education. If youth protests are amplified by institutional authority, if the vacant condo is tied symbolically to the shuttered classroom, the government's payoffs change. Suddenly, ignoring the public becomes more expensive than offending the speculators. Suddenly, the casino table begins to tilt. Till then, the show goes on. The government blames the immigrant. Universities wobble toward insolvency. Speculators collect their winnings. And an entire generation is told to wait patiently in rented servitude. Canada isn't experiencing a housing crisis. It's hosting a housing carnival. The tents are gaudy, the games rigged, the prizes fake.
$390 monthly on Ontario Works for housing. Whoever is keeping it that way, whoever decided that, I'm gonna break in your house. I'm gonna eat the fish out of your aquarium. I'm gonna go pee in your water tank. I'm actually gonna pee in the tanks of all the toilets in your house, in your mansion. I'm gonna water your carpet like a lawn and then sprinkle flour on it. I'm gonna go to your summer cottage. I'm gonna repatriate that to whatever nation is closest. I'm gonna make you deal with the treaties. It's gonna be your problem now. I'm gonna sprinkle clover on your lawn and then I'm gonna plant trilliums. And when you finally illegally dig that up, you're gonna find the actual criminal thing I put under that lawn. No spoilers, I won't tell you. I won't spoil the surprise for you. And then I'm gonna go in your garage to however many cars you have, 2, 3, 4. I'll pick whichever one I like. I'm gonna flip it 3 times with the strength of a mother whose baby is pinned under the car. One time this way, and then I'm gonna lean it on one tire and slash the other 3 so insurance won't cover that. The feelings I have for you, trust me, much less sane than this.
One thing I can't stand about the housing crisis in Canada is politicians pretending that they're trying to fix it, because they're not. Like, we all know they're not. They're trying to keep the crisis, which is high housing crisis, going for as long as they can. And every step they've ever taken has confirmed that. Every step they're like, no, we're making it more affordable, is just to pump more people, more cash, more liquidity, bail out developers, like, it's all stuff that would make housing, the cost of housing, go higher, and it has. We've reached a tipping point in Canada now where the only growth in this economy has been through immigration, through largely low wage jobs. And housing is just so expensive. We're cramming like 14 people into apartments in Toronto, and so they can work at Tim Hortons. Like, that's the economy now. That's what we're doing. And it's just what it's for. This is the Minister of Housing even said, no, the cost of housing can't come down, but it's at crisis levels now. People can't afford it. People can't afford to fucking live. And so, like, are wages going to come up? Well, you're bringing more people into the country. Well, I mean, they have stopped that down because finally people got so pissed at them. Are wages going to come up to where we can afford $1 million? I mean, you could just say housing is never going to be affordable, but it's fine. It's just like, just stop pretending like you're trying to fix it. You're not. No, I see you. I fucking see you, dude. I'm so sick of it. Oh, we gotta fix it. Okay, that's not what you're trying to do, though. Just say the fucking truth, man.
How is that possible? Let's think about this for a second. Housing should be dirt cheap in Canada because we have the most dirty to build on. By far, we have over 10 times more land per person than the second closest G7 country. And yet we have the fewest homes per capita. They have more homes per capita in Japan than we do here in Canada. Why? We have the land. We spend twice as much as a share of GDP on home building. We have the most mortgage debt, so we're borrowing more to build homes. So where are the homes? What's stopping them? The answer is government. In Vancouver today, 60% of the cost of every newly built home is government. It is government taxes, fees, charges, delays, land set-asides, and more. More money from a newly built home in Vancouver goes to bureaucrats than goes to the carpenters, electricians, and plumbers who actually build the homes.
Canada is in crisis. Housing's unaffordable. Emergency rooms are overwhelmed. Families are struggling to make ends meet, and there's still no budget. So what do our politicians do? They take the summer off. No budget, no plan, just pay raises for themselves and time off. What kind of country have we become?
One of the dumbest financial decisions you can make is buy a house. People think it's always a smart move to make, but those days are long gone. It doesn't make sense in Canada anymore. In society, hearing it from your parents, we're programmed to think that buying your house is the next thing you should do and it's the best financial decision. But here's the problem. You save for a down payment, all that money goes towards your home, you have no more money for investments. You take on massive debts for 25 years, and then you also have to pay for things on an annual basis, property tax, insurance, repairs and maintenance. In some cases, it can still make sense. Let's say you and your partner make $250K, you buy a house for $750K. Anything 3 times your household income should be manageable so that you have extra money left over. But otherwise, you're better off renting and investing the difference. Trust me, you'll have a bigger place, you'll pay less money, you'll have more flexibility, and you'll have more time to do where the hell you want.
Real estate market in Canada is so messed up, I don't even know where to begin. Well, let's start with the fact that there is such an unaffordability problem in Canada. Who is going to be able to afford a house in Canada? Guys, you are going to have to make $350,000 to afford that house. Who makes $350,000 other than the top 1% in Canada? So mind-boggling. Get this, Vancouver is the 3rd most expensive city in the world to buy. Toronto is in the top 12, soon going to be in the top 10 for sure. We are incredibly overpriced for what we get here in Canada. And let's not mention the cost of just about everything. Food prices are insane. Have you gone to buy a bag of milk? Who is spending $6 for a bag of milk and thinking to themselves, what has gone wrong with this country that we have to buy, first of all, our milk in bags, and secondly, how it's $6 to buy milk. Food costs have gone out of control. Food bank usage right here in Ontario has gone up over 134% in 1 year. I don't know where this country is going. It is overwhelmingly expensive for the 2 fundamental things, food and shelter, and Canada's got to come up with a solution because both of those don't have an end in sight of increasing in price. Big problem.
Canada is in crisis. Housing's unaffordable. Emergency rooms are overwhelmed. Families are struggling to make ends meet, and there's still no budget. So what do our politicians do? They take the summer off. No budget, no plan, just pay raises for themselves and time off. What kind of country have we become?
Canada's real estate market might be imploding, and with it, the rest of our economy. According to new data from the Canadian Real Estate Association, the sales to new listing ratio, or the SNLR, fell to 49.3% in June, marking the weakest June demand balance since 1995, a time when Canada was in its most severe real estate crash in modern history. And it's not just the level that's alarming, it's the speed of the decline. The SNLR has now dropped for 4 consecutive years, falling 23.8 points from its peak during the pandemic. A collapse, once again, not seen since the lead up to the 90s housing crash. The ratio's plunge is being driven by new listings rising 8%, while sales ticked up just 3.5%, meaning supply is now growing more than twice as fast as demand. Now, you might be saying, well, wait a minute. That should be impossible. We're in the middle of a housing shortage crisis. We're also told the housing crisis is being driven by a lack of supply to meet surging population growth. And on paper, this is true. Canada added over 1.2 million people to its population in 2023 and over 1.3 million in 2024. But if demand is surging, why are homes suddenly sitting longer on the market and why is demand declining? Well, because now the tide has shifted from a housing shortage to an affordability crisis. The cost of living is killing the market. Interest rates remain stubbornly high, wage growth is completely stagnant, grocery bills and rent have absolutely exploded. In fact, the average take-home income for a family of 4 is $8,000 less than the average cost of living for that same family of 4. So the average Canadian simply can't afford to buy, no matter how badly they want to. The result, of course, is the current paradox that we're in. Record population growth with millions needing homes, yet buyer demand is completely disappearing. And this is not just a social crisis, it's a market crisis. The last time the SNLR dropped this quickly, it triggered the sharpest real estate correction in Canadian history. In the Greater Toronto Area, average home prices dropped 34% from 1989 to 1991 and continued to decline through the 90s. From 1989 to 1996, Canadian home prices dropped by nearly 40% nationally when adjusted for inflation, and housing starts plummeted by over 50%. Canada fell into a deep recession from April 1990 to 1992, with real GDP declining by about 2% in 1991 and unemployment rising from 7.2% to 12.1% by 1992. Nationally, over $400 billion was wiped out in household assets alone. Canada was grinding through this for nearly a decade, and if these numbers are as strong an indication as the Canadian Real Estate Association says, we may be heading down the exact same path. But this time, it's not just speculation or overbuilding driving the crash, it's systemic affordability failure driven by bad government action and bad government policy.
Still talking about the living cost in Canada, I think number one thing that is sucking a lot of money is mortgage, the mortgage payment. Apart from that, you pay property tax and then the bills. By the time you sum everything up, so they almost times 2 of the rent you were paying before. And these houses in Canada are expensive. We are saying the truth. Compare to US, and the houses are small. I know people like it's not small. The houses are small, on a very small pocket size, and then ridiculous prices. And when people, when I was complaining last video about living costs and everything, people are like, some people are not ripe to get mortgage and they call mortgage, blah, blah, blah. If you are not ripe to get mortgage, the bank will not give you mortgage. There's an amount you need to have, or you must be earning for the qualify for a certain amount of mortgage. So if you are earning that amount, they'll give you. You are not earning, you will not qualify. And whether you wait now or you wait till the next 5 years, it's not going to get better, because 2-3 years ago, houses that were selling for like 400,000 or less are now 550,000 Canadian dollar. Same kind of house, same structure. That's like 150,000 extra. So if, for example, a couple that is earning 120,000 household income, they didn't get the mortgage like 3 years ago, they were waiting because they think they are not ripe. They are waiting till now. They think it will get better, because the way salary increase is not the same way the prices of things are increasing. It's not the same way prices of houses increasing. It's not the same way interest rate is increasing. It's not the same way price of groceries is increasing. Everything keeps increasing. And unless you don't want to get a mortgage, you want to continue to rent for life, which is fine. That's what some people want. But if you want to get a mortgage, once you qualify to get a mortgage, get it. Just get something that you can pay for. At the end of the day, you might not have any savings, and you might have, depending on people's income. I know people that have 3-4 mortgages in this same Canada. They rent some out, and they are living in some, and they are using the rent money to pay the mortgages of those houses. And why there are people that can't even get mortgage at all, even people that have been here for hundreds of years, the indigenous whites, some of them can't even qualify to get mortgage. So things are expensive, especially the house. Those houses are always annoying me when I see them. I'll say a $1.5 million house. The backyard just be small space like this. Even the what do they call it? Driveway. There was one I saw. I'll put a screenshot here. 3-car garage, but the driveway is like trapezium. The way they manage land to build house in this Edmonton, and maybe it's just the area I am, but most of the houses I see, the way they manage land to build it, you would think, I don't even know. And for those ridiculous prices. And if you think, okay, if you go to smaller cities, For example, Spruce Grove is not far from Edmonton, Beaumont. Even houses there are ridiculously expensive. But I will see houses, I'm like, why is this costing 600,000? This should not be more than 350. Even a 2-bedroom condo now is almost 300,000. Why? Seriously, those condos should not cost more than 150. A townhouse right now is almost 460, 500,000. Townhouse, 3-bed. 2-bed is like 400. Houses are just ridiculously expensive. And by the time we add interest rate to it, it goes high again. And people will be like, cut your coat according to your size. So what happens? You go and buy a shed, or you buy Costco shed and put it on the land, and so that you cut your coat according to your size. Because even houses that are not new built, that are old, houses that are 25 years old, they are still expensive. By the time you buy those houses, the money you spend on maintenance, you will do like this. So what are the options? Continue to rent and don't get a mortgage. Maybe that will be the option that people will have. Because if you want to get mortgage and continue, in addition to all the other bills, things are expensive.
Major increase is in housing prices. Okay, so Canada these past 5 years has seen a huge influx of immigrants, and this has caused housing prices to skyrocket. The United States, which has a much larger economy than Canada, the housing prices are pretty stable. You can still afford to buy a house if you're a young person in the United States, not in Canada. Okay, you see this huge spike in Canada. The housing prices are now unaffordable. This is a chart that shows you economic growth as compared to housing prices. So as you can see in the United States, housing prices, there's a correlation between income and housing prices. Okay, this is pretty reasonable. In Canada, it is not reasonable. Okay? So GDP, housing prices is growing like this, but housing prices is just skyrocketing. And that's why Canadians feel as though the Canadian dream of one day having their own house, it's basically dead. So one strange thing is that as Canada lets in more immigrants, and as property prices go up, you would think that they would build more and more houses. But as you can see, housing supply, it's pretty flat, even though immigration is going up. Does anyone know why this would be the case? Why is it that you have a policy of letting in more immigrants, but you don't have a policy of building more housing for them? That's kind of strange, right? Can anyone guess why that would be?
Money, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly correct, okay? So policy is not being controlled by what's best for the nation and the people. It's controlled by vested interests that will make money off the process, right? So as you say, real estate developers can make money off this process, but the people who benefit the most are actually property owners, right? So if you already have a house, if the supply is constant but the demand goes up, then you know from economics class that the value of a house increases artificially. So it's making homeowners very happy. Okay? And that's why you have this crisis in Canada.
How bad is the housing crash in Canada? Well, I'm going to tell you, we are currently this burgundy or maroon line, if you will. 4 years into the correction right here, you can see that. We are below where Ontario in the 90s were 4 years into that correction. So we're probably the worst housing crash in Canada that's ever happened, but there's still a healthy margin between us and the US in 2008. Now, a key difference between us and the US, a lot of people say, hey, there's so much fraud in Canadian real estate, and therefore a lot of the debt that's out there is very high risk because of the amount of fraud, and there is a lot of fraud. But I don't know if it's anywhere near as bad as the mortgages that were being handed out in 2007 that weren't even considered fraud, but would be considered highly fraudulent in our market. And even today, I can get something in the States called a DSCR loan. I don't even think they look at your income. I don't think they care. They lend on the basis that as long as the property you're buying, the income from that property is a certain margin above the expenses for the property, they'll give you the loan. I don't even think they look at your income. That's today in 2025 after they went and tightened up all the lending regulations in the state. So imagine how bad that was in 2007. But yeah, the housing market bottomed after about 5 years in 2007 for the US. It bottomed as well about 5 years in for Ontario in the 90s. We're at year 4 right now, so we'll have to see what happens. I would say this is probably worse than Ontario in the 90s, which means it could take, up to 8 years before we're back in a rising market. Well, I guess it could actually take longer than that if we're worse than Ontario in the 90s. But we'll see.
There is no middle class anymore. Middle income households making up to 125K are getting squeezed out of the GTA. I love people telling me that because I'm a teacher, I'm rich. Yet so many teachers that I know, even people who are at the top of the pay scale, are struggling to make ends meet. Because if you want to teach in the GTA like I do, you need to afford to live in the GTA. And most people, regardless of their salaries, can no longer afford to live in the GTA, with the working middle class now being called the invisible poor. And this report calls people making between $40,000 and $125,000 middle class. If you're making $40,000, you're not middle class. I don't know how you would be surviving off of that income. I don't know where you would rent on that income in the GTA. I don't know how you would be able to afford to have a kid on that kind of income. We are not allowing people to live or survive. They're definitely not thriving. We are barely surviving in some people's scenarios. And while the median household income in Toronto is about $100,000, our salaries in the GTA in Canada are not keeping up with rising housing costs. Productivity in Canada keeps going up. The CEO pay keeps going up. The wealthiest wealth share, yeah, kiddo, you're right, keeps going up. But our salaries, on average, across Canada are not going up, and definitely not going up more than inflation, or barely even keeping up with inflation if they're even doing that. Toronto's price to income ratio is 12 times the median household income. You would have to dedicate 77% of your salary to mortgage payments to own a home in Toronto if you could even afford the down payment to begin with. If we want to start addressing the cost of living crisis seriously, what we need to start doing is to start looking at our system and figuring out where we can stop focusing on having a profit motive. Housing is a human right. We need to be able to live in places so that we can then work and be part of the capital machine. Capitalism's great until you start running out of other people's money. Because when nobody can afford to live in Toronto, what's going to happen to housing then? When nobody can afford food and rent, they're definitely not going to afford other goods. And if they're not buying other goods, what happens? The companies that make those goods start to sell less. Maybe they fire some employees. Maybe they go out of business. Because the economy is only strong when the individuals, each and every one of them, can afford not only to survive, but to thrive. We are not letting people thrive anymore. Build government subsidized housing. You want those prefab homes? Let's do them. But let's make them actually affordable. Let's make the government own a bunch of them. Let's do rent to own systems. Because kiddo, I don't think you're going to be able to afford a home no matter how much money I accrue, no matter how much I try to help you. At this rate, I don't think we can do it, no matter how cute you look.
Let's talk about Canada's housing crisis. We all know it's here and that it exists. Trust me, even realtors know. And Manulife just published a really good article about it. There's one thing in particular that I wanted to talk about. This. According to Manulife's survey, a third of homeowners admit that they needed their parents' help. Nearly half of all Gen Z and millennial homeowners had their parents' help. And the thing that I think people just really need to understand is, A, not a lot of people have the means to buy. But if you do, don't let your pride get ahead of you. There's absolutely nothing wrong with getting help to buy your first house. Look at the affordability crisis that we're in. How else would you buy a house? And second, can we stop shaming people that got help from their parents to buy, because it doesn't mean that they're not homeowners.
Canada now ranks dead last among G7 nations for housing per capita. We're not short on land, we're short on leadership. Our cities are tied up in outdated zoning laws, endless red tape, and local voices who say, "Not in my neighborhood," every time someone tries to build something that doesn't look like a single family home with a white picket fence and a Range Rover. Every delay, every excuse just makes housing scarcer and more expensive.
People deserve homes, not survival. This is Canada's housing crisis. Subscribe for more real voices from Canada.